What does it mean to own a game? That question might sound silly, but over the last few years, the definition has quietly started to shift. Games are becoming more of a temporary experience, only being available for a certain amount of time rather than being something that you can own and revisit forever. Let me illustrate it with an example. Imagine paying $60, $70, or even $80+ on a game, putting tons of hours into it, or buying tons of cosmetics, and one day it suddenly and without warning vanishes from libraries and storefronts everywhere. No offline mode, no refund, no way to continue to play the game that you paid for. This is unfortunately a very real possibility, and it's completely by design. The worst part? As of now, it's technically legal to do so. With the convenience of online storefronts and digitally downloadable games comes the shaky and ever-changing legality of game ownership. Large corporations and third parties telling you how you can use the thing that you paid for, or in some cases what you can even buy to begin with. Major platforms retroactively changing terms and licensing whenever they decide to pull the plug or disallow the sale for certain games. This problem is even more widespread than you'd think. What originally started as an issue with the ownership of games has spread into many other facets. The issue now affects things like game preservation, online censorship, and even how games are designed. It seems that the games industry cannot go more than a few months without shitting its pants, so I wanted to take a look at the most recent events and trace a line back to how it all started, and inevitably throw my thoughts on the matter out into the void. If you've seen any of my other commentary-based videos, it'll follow a similar format to those. I'll be going over an abridged history of some of the biggest controversies involving these topics, as well as some of the more recent developments, along with my thoughts interjected throughout. While I aim to be informative with these kind of videos, there will probably be some dumb memes and jokes in there just to keep the video somewhat engaging and lighthearted. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's start back with the event that arguably kicked all of this off. Innocuously enough, with a racing game of all things. Little did anyone know the Pandora's box of bullshit that it would eventually open. The Crew was a game released in 2014 by Ubisoft. You remember those guys, right? They like buggy, repetitive games and trying to charge everyone for everything. The video isn't solely about them, but they're one of the more scummy mainstream developers, so it makes sense that they were basically patient zero for this whole thing. Anyway, the game was cited as being pretty good in terms of gameplay and world by those who played it at the time, with the only real negatives being that, despite it being a mostly single-player game, it required you to always be online, causing many technical issues, and of course the microtransaction shop. Despite these though, the game did well enough to warrant some DLC, of which they got 2, Wild Run in 2015 and Calling All Units in 2016, followed by some sequels, The Crew 2 in 2018 and The Crew Motorfest in 2023. That's all well and good, meaty, but how does that relate to what's going on now? Well, here's where we get to the tricky part. In December of 2024, Ubisoft delisted The Crew, along with its expansions and microtransactions associated with the game, announcing that in March of that same year, the servers would be shut down due to upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. Which sounds to me like they didn't want to pay to keep up the servers, or maybe it was paying for a license for the soundtrack or branding if I had to guess. Whatever the case, they did shut the servers down at the time and began revoking the licenses for the game from people who had already bought the game, essentially taking away any way for players to access the game. The real kicker here is that players discovered that the game did have an unutilized programming for an offline mode, and it made many feel that they just didn't want to put in the effort to make that feature available despite them clearly thinking about it. It was around the same time that the director of subscriptions of Ubisoft in an interview stated that gamers need to get comfortable not owning their games, likening it to the likes of streaming services. People were obviously less than enthusiastic about this, prompting a number of different kinds of backlash, including review bombing the sequels, a class action lawsuit, and the creation of the Stop Killing Games initiative. The lawsuit, filed by 2 Californian residents who purchased physical copies of the game, accused Ubisoft of misleading players into believing that the purchases of their game were permanent instead of buying a limited-time license for it, along with falsely representing that the physical games contain the files for the game instead of just a key to unlock the DRM for it. However, despite the activation codes technically being slated to be good until 2099 as per the packaging, Ubisoft in response emphasized there was no unfettered ownership rights of the game implied when people purchased the game, and that statement was stated in the EULA and certain copies of the packaging. This isn't even the only case of these ideas. Recently, our pals over at Nintendo, with another 900 IQ plan to prevent piracy or whatever, also decided to go this route with the Switch 2. People were upset when the games no longer came on the cartridges despite having a more expensive price point for physical copies. They've also become nothing more than digital codes to access the games, which is now stated in their EULA that you don't own your games, only a license to play them, which is tied to your account and can be revoked whenever. Along with this, it's also stated that they reserve the right to render your Switch 2 that you bought permanently unusable, and even prevents you from suing them over it if you tamper with it. I know it seems like I can't go a single video without bitching about Nintendo, however, they really do it to themselves at this point. As a result, to prevent further instances like these from happening by making game ownership more transparent, a California bill was signed into law, forcing companies to more prominently display a note telling consumers that they are buying a license for the game and don't technically own the game itself.
What the hell no?
This has affected all digital storefronts which sell digital goods in an attempt to be more transparent about ownership, but it hasn't really solved the issue at hand, as licenses for games can still be revoked at the discretion of storefronts or publishers. It's a weird gray area where something that was once considered a product is being treated more along the lines of a service. At the time of me writing the script, the lawsuit's still ongoing, and the total counts filed of wrongdoing by Ubisoft is up to 9. As far as I can tell from my research, Ubisoft has tried to get the case dismissed, but has not yet made a counter-argument to the additional claims posted by the plaintiffs. However, this was not the only result of the crew being shut down. More prominently in recent events was the Stop Killing Games initiative. Launched in response to the shutdown of the crew by YouTuber Ross Scott, the petition aims to bring about legislation that would require developers to include ways for the games to be played after support for them ends. This would force developers to have a plan for the game after they're done with it, rather than just pulling the plug and making it unplayable. Whether that means adding an offline mode to games or giving people the ability to host private servers, this would effectively allow people to keep playing the games that they paid for after the developer no longer wants anything to do with it. The initiative gained a lot of coverage online, being covered by everyone from gaming news outlets to other YouTubers. Many people, from content creators like Critical, PewDiePie, and Osmongold, to game developers such as Notch and Owlcat Games, and even members of the European Parliament have shown support for the initiative. However, not everyone has agreed with it, with the most vocal being Jason Hall, otherwise known as Pirate Software, who criticized the initiative for its supposed vague language and potential harm to the games industry. However, most of it seems to be coming either from a misunderstanding of the initiative and its goals, or some need to be contrarian to good ideas. It was also opposed by representatives from Video Games Europe, a lobbying group representing developers and publishers from the EU, stating that it would be too expensive for developers and publishers to offer private servers or single-player modes in games that lose online multiplayer support. It has all the usual suspects that you would expect to be opposed to such things, including Activision Blizzard, Ubisoft, Riot Games, EA, Nintendo, and many more. I'll just put the list up on screen now. This doesn't make sense to me, as shown by many of the fan revitalizations of no longer supported games that we've gotten over the years. And it really just screams to me that they don't want to put in the effort, or they don't want to lose out on a way to monetize it from a remake or something down the road. Also, I don't know where they've been for the last 30 years, but most games prior to the last decade have had a single-player mode or offline mode. Online features being the primary meat of the game have only really been commonplace for a relatively short time. As of July 31st, the European Citizens Initiative closed with the Stop Killing Games ending on 1.4 million signatures, well beyond the necessary 100,000, allowing it to be considered for debate in Parliament. Whether or not this movement makes any real change is yet to be seen, and me residing in the good old USA where petitions don't really do anything, it won't matter as much. However, at the very least it opens people's eyes to how important this kind of thing is. I believe the goal to be a noble one, and that something needs to be done to regulate the kind of things these large corporations can get away with. I believe there needs to be more transparency on what exactly you're getting and for how long. Who knows, if it succeeds, maybe others will follow suit and something can be done globally. I remember a time not long ago, on a car ride home from a Walmart with a new game in hand, eager to play it as soon as I got home. That was my game. I owned that forever. And most of these games would go on to provide a lifetime of fun that I could revisit whenever. The more this kind of trend keeps up, the more that kind of idea becomes nothing but a memory, and I think that's a shame. As convenient as things are nowadays, where you can download most games whenever, under this system, some games can still slip through the cracks and become lost media, either intentionally or not. And truthfully, I don't think anything can quite replace physically owning your game collection. But pulling the plug on a game isn't the only way that companies can take games away from people. In some cases, a small handful of people can decide what games you're even allowed to buy to begin with. Short off the heels of Stop Killing Games came another recent event that's been impacting which video games you're allowed to play. Recently, Steam and itch.io have removed or delisted hundreds of adult-oriented or not safe for work games, retroactively adding a rule to their allowed types of games, which states now that they have to adhere to the policies of their payment processors as well, whereas previously the devs only had to adhere to Steam's guidelines. The reason behind the sudden disallowment of them was because of pressure from the payment processors, i.e. Visa and MasterCard. But why the sudden change in morals for these large soulless payment processing companies?
Oh, please. I have no soul.
Well, to understand that, we must journey to the land down under and talk about Collective Shout. Collective Shout is an Australian advocacy group against the sexualization of women. Doing some digging online shows that video games have not been their first target. This anti-gooning group of angry soccer mom wallabies have gone after everything from sports to music to clothing, and even tried to pressure Elon Musk into taking adult content off Twitter. Basically anything with a slight amount of nudity in it, they seem to be against it. In fact, this wasn't even their first crusade against video games, as they've gone after GTA 5 before, as well as Detroit Become Human. Their most recent campaign targeted Steam and other online video game markets in an attempt to get the games that they deemed questionable taken off storefronts. When Steam ignored their emails, they took the issue straight to the source of the money, which involved calling and emailing Visa and MasterCard around 1,000 times in order to get them to pressure online platforms into taking several hundred of these kinds of gooner games down, which largely worked, at least temporarily. While I don't think most people would argue that getting some of these kinds of graphic games off the internet is a bad thing, I don't think many people are mourning the loss of interactive sex futanari incest episode 4. That's not all that's been affected by this currently, and it certainly won't be the last. These kinds of blanket bans on anything deemed not safe for work have affected many games that handle graphic topics or content, such as the recent indie hit Mouthwashing and other indie horror titles, as well as one of my personal favorite games, Postal 2, where most of the nudity and themes are played for laughs. Even stuff like Grand Theft Auto and most visual novel style games are at risk of being taken down by these broad, scorched earth kind of approaches. If this is left unchecked, what's to stop them from labeling stuff like Cyberpunk 2077 or The Witcher 3 is not safe for work due to having lewd moments in those? Really, it's hurting a large portion of games over a few bad apples and setting a terrible precedent for censorship as a whole. Visa and MasterCard seem to have been trying to deflect blame in all this, stating that they didn't directly tell Steam to take the games down or that they're trying to police what people can buy. However, this is directly contradicted by a statement from Valve, where MasterCard cited that anything harmful to their brand can't be purchased using their services. It goes without saying that there's been huge backlash to these events, with everyone from developers claiming that it's a direct attack on creative expression and artistic freedom, to gamers and gooners claiming that it infringes on people's right to free speech. Many people have been vocal on the issues, citing that the vague rules set by payment processing companies and what they will or won't allow sets a dangerous precedent for censorship everywhere. It essentially means that a small number of angry people and a small number of payment processing companies can control what kinds of media people consume or what kind of topics people can make media about. People everywhere online have been banding together to protest the censorship directly to payment processors via emails and calls. One petition online calling for the payment processors to stop controlling what we can watch, read, or play, with a direct quote of, "Nobody is forced to engage with content they find offensive, but they have no right to dictate what others are allowed to enjoy, especially when it's within the bounds of the law." Other ways that people have fought against this is by GOG giving away a number of censored games that were affected by this incident for free, avoiding the payment processors entirely, to which over 1 million people claimed during these times. Others, such as the developer for the indie game File Exhumed, released their game for free as donationware after being banned on Steam due to sexual content, despite the game only containing implied themes of the subject matter. At the time of me writing this, it seems that most storefronts are trying to find a workaround, such as exploring other possible payment processors or putting certain games up for free. While it's clear that transparency and moderation of some kind needs to be in place for these kinds of games with such themes, so we don't end up with another situation like No Mercy, as long as the game is legal, I don't think anyone should control what other people are allowed to purchase with their money or play on their own time. If you don't like a certain game, simply don't engage with it. This kind of thing not only affects people who play games, but people who make games too. That could be putting whole livelihoods at stake depending on how governments and corporations decide to proceed with this kind of thing. If a small portion of people can bully these large corporations into taking down something they don't agree with, what's to say it won't happen with something else in the future? It's a slippery slope with these kinds of overcorrections. In short, it seems like whether it be retroactively taking your games away from you or deciding what games you can buy, it's clear that this isn't just a handful of bad calls. It's a slow, steady redefinition of what owning a game even means. And under this new definition, ownership isn't about the player. Your access is borrowed time, granted at the whim of the publisher, the platform, or even a third-party service that has nothing to do with game development at all. The idea of you'll own nothing and be happy has never been a more terrifying thought, and if things like this keep up, it's closer than it may appear. This is why conversations around preservation, consumer rights, and initiatives like Stop Killing Games matter so much. Because if we just keep letting the industry draw the lines for us, the concept of a personal gaming library might just become another nostalgic relic. Thank you for watching. Roll the outro. Hi there. If you've watched until now, I just wanted to say thank you. It really means the most. If you enjoyed it so far, remember to hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already, as it helps the channel. Comments are also appreciated. Did you agree with my thoughts? Do you feel like sharing your own? Let me know in the comments. I think these are important topics to think about and discuss going forward. If you want to see more of my content, I'll have playlists in the end cards as well as the description right above my socials if you want to follow me on any of that. Twitter, Discord server, etc. I have other commentary videos like this, as well as other less serious videos, such as game reviews and video essays on random topics, so feel free to check those out. You might find something you like. If you really like my content, you want to support me and what I do here, there's a Patreon link too, where you can get your name in the credits as well as early access to my videos and periodic input on video ideas, but no pressure, I'm just happy that you watch this. Speaking of patrons, a huge thank you to NDH for your support. You help me continue to make these silly videos, and I appreciate that a lot. Thank you all once again for watching, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.